All right, everyone, I showed that it's 3 o'clock. Are we ready to go?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair.
Savita, thank you. All right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It is now 3 o'clock on Tuesday, May 11, 2022. I am co-chair Sunny Garza, and today I'll be chairing Livable Places Action Committee meeting. I call this meeting to order as a virtual meeting using Microsoft Teams. As this is a committee meeting, public speakers may speak up to 2 minutes when called on at the designated time at the end of the meeting, which will be for public comment as shown on the agenda. A couple of notes before we get going. Please make sure to mute yourself and turn off your camera during the meeting. If you're on the phone, use *6 to mute and unmute. Committee members, if you would like to speak during the meeting, please use the raise your hand feature or unmute and state your last name so you can be recognized by the chair. A reminder to those of you who are not on the subcommittee, the raise your hand feature is not available to you. You will not be called. Please put your name in the chat and we will call you at the end during public hearing. At this point in time, I will go ahead and call the roll. Subcommittee members, if you are muted, please go ahead and unmute yourself and we'll begin the roll call. The chair, Sunny Garza, is present. Co-chair Lisa Clark.
Present.
Is present, thank you. Bradley Pepper. Is not present. Casey Morgan. Is not present. Curtis Davis. Curtis Davis is not present. Mr. Davis? No? All right. Dr. Sherry Smith?
Present.
Present, thank you. Dustin O'Neill? Dustin O'Neill is not present. Sean Masick? Sean Masick is not present. Fernando Zamaripa? Fernando Zamaripa is not present. Jeff Kaplan? Jeff Kaplan?
Oh, okay.
Jeff Kaplan, are you present? All right, Jeff Kaplan is not present. Kathy Payton? Kathy Payton is not present. Kirby Liu? Kirby Liu is not present. Lloyd Smith? Lloyd Smith is not present. Luis Guajardo? Luis Guajardo is not present. Matthew Camp?
Matthew Camp present.
Matthew Camp is present. Thank you. Megan Sigler?
Sigler present.
Megan Sigler is present. Thank you. Mark Nightingale?
Mark Nightingale is present.
Mr. Nightingale is present. Thank you. Mike Dishberger? Mike Dishberger? No, you're present. You need to unmute. Mike? All right, we'll call you at the end again. Neil Dykeman?
Present.
Neil Dykeman is present. Thank you. Omar Isfar?
Omar Isfar is present.
Omar Isfar is present. Thank you. Peter Friedman?
Peter Friedman present.
Mr. Friedman is present. Thank you. Sandy Stevens? Sandy Stevens?
Sandy Stevens is present.
Is present. Thank you. Scott Kubler? Scott Kubler? Scott Kubler is not present. Steve Curry?
Curry present.
Steve Curry is present. Thank you. Toby Cole? Toby Cole is not present. Tyrone McDaniel? Mr. McDaniel?
Tyrone McDaniel present.
Tyrone McDaniel is present. Thank you. Johanna Mahmood? Johanna Mahmood is not present. Zion Escobar?
Zion Escobar present.
Zion Escobar is present. Thank you. I'll now go back to Mike Dishberger. Are you with us, Mike?
I am. I'm off mute. Thank you.
You're there?
Yes, present.
Thank you. Mike Dishberger is present. For those of you who are not here to hear your name called during the roll call, subcommittee members, please speak up now and let us know if you are in fact present.
Sean Massock's here.
Sean Massack is here. Anyone else? All right.
Chris Senegal.
All right. Thank you so much. Any other subcommittee members present that missed the roll call? All right, then I show a total of, I believe it's 15 members here with us via video. All right, thank you so very much for that. We'll now go through a couple of really quick meeting instructions, how best to participate in the meeting. I will do this as quickly as possible. Again, after joining the meeting, stay muted with your camera off, or *6 on your telephone to stay muted. If you wish to speak, enter your name in the chat and your name will be called in the order received at the end of the meeting. When the chair calls on any individual from the public to speak, please state your name and spell your last name out loud. A verbal recording of this meeting is important. Please speak slowly and clearly. The chat may not be used for anything other than public speaker requests or basic staff administration about posted agenda items. And again, the raise your hand feature is to be used only by subcommittee members and staff to identify their interest in a comment. Public comments will be heard verbally again at the time designated on the agenda at the end of the meeting. And then at the end of said meeting, please disconnect or hang up when I adjourn the meeting. Thank you. All right, we'll now move on with the agenda to the director's report.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Margaret Wallace-Brown, and I'm the director for the Planning and Development Department. I welcome everyone here in May of 2022. We have done a lot of work so far, and we have some of our most critical things left to do. So I am grateful that you're sticking with us and you're on this journey with us to improve Houston's development code. There's a couple things I want to address that have been mentioned in the group over the past several months. The one thing that I do want to make really clear with everyone, much of what we're doing also involves Houston Public Works. And I want everyone to feel confident that we are not doing our work here in this committee in a vacuum. This department works closely with Public Works on many, many issues, but especially on these issues that we're talking about. You'll see people from Public Works in this meeting frequently. They have been asked to come in for certain topics, but we also invite them to every single one of your meetings. We meet with them at least monthly in the technical advisory group. That's a staff level discussion that takes place where Savita and her team relay to the Public Works team that wasn't in this meeting what the discussion was, what we're looking at, what we need. It involves many other departments as well, but a key player in that is always Public Works. And then in addition to that, there is a monthly meeting between director level and assistant director level positions where we talk about development coordination through the city. And this is and we relay and coordinate with Public Works through that. And then to add to that, there's just lots of times during the week that either Savita and her team are talking with Public Works or relaying what the needs are. That Carol, Director Haddock, and I speak regularly about this. And so I just want to make sure that everybody is confident that as we put these ideas forward and as we move forward as a group with improvements to the development code, we, the planning department, understands that it's not a vacuum and that the planning department has been working and coordinating with the Department of Public Works and other related departments. And so all of the changes necessary, and say, for instance, the IDM, in order to affect the changes that we're talking about here in this committee, all of the IDM changes will come forward at the same time. We're very much in agreement that tandem changes need to be made and they need to come together. So I know there's been a lot of talk on this committee, and I know there is concern because history tells us that planning does not always talk to Public Works and vice versa, but I just want to assure everyone that we are on our game when it comes to cooperation and coordination and collaboration. And so I guess that's it. So thank you for being here, and I am anxious to see what we talk about today. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Wallace-Brown. All right, so actually, the director spoke again to what we're going to be discussing today, which is basically a review of what we've been discussing over the past many months and the recommendations that we're going to be seeing going forward. So next on this report is recommendations for narrow lots. And Subita, I believe that is you.
Yes, thank you, sir. Good afternoon, everyone, co-chairs and committee members. So today we have a packed agenda. The purpose on the agenda today, we have recommendations for narrow lots, followed by recommendations for courtyard style developments, and then homework activities. And then we'll have time for public comments. The purpose of today's meeting is to, based on the feedback we received on the preliminary ideas from the committee, we have draft proposed recommendations, and the purpose of today's meeting is to look at the recommendations and make sure there is consensus established. Next slide, please. So like always, Livable Places, the purpose of Livable Places Committee is to create opportunities within our development standards that encourage housing variety and affordability. I'm sure all of you have noticed the new logo that we have as we march into engagement, phase 2 of engagement, because we are coming up with recommendations. We want to make sure we are getting public feedback on all those. And we have established tools for us to go and create engagement with the public. And this is the start of that. Next slide, please. The self-guided tour response summary that we have. So all of you have participated, and thank you for everyone, including public, who participated in the activity that we had, which is the self-guided tour, where we had 12 sites for everyone to take a walk or bike along, and we got some good response, and we have looked at all of the responses. What is listed here is in summary, the points that I noted from the responses. For example, the buildings are too close, parking on the street is uncomfortable, the streets are unpassable, nice, the streets are nice to walk and bike. It would be nice to have more sidewalks, make room available for public parking on the streets. The continuous driveways interrupt the sidewalks. Cars are blocking the sidewalks when they're parked in the driveway. Use of the road had to use for driving lanes. Sometimes the pedestrians or the bikers, they have to maneuver through passing cars that are parked on the sidewalk. There is no guest parking, no backyard space in certain developments. Streets are too narrow. There is no green space. Visibility corners are an issue at some times, and keep cars off the street. So these are all the different points I have noted from the survey, and I really appreciate all of the comments we received, and we are evaluating through them and making sure that we incorporate all of the ideas that you will provide in future also. So that's the summary of the responses, and we are working on posting all of the summary reports on our website and Let's Talk Houston by the end of the week. Next slide, please. So what have we accomplished so far? It's more than a year worth of work, and I really appreciate all of your time. So we have, so far we have looked at residential buffering and lighting and screening requirements. Committee has also looked at multi-unit residential developments on unrestricted lots where with no deed on properties with no deed restrictions. Committee considered garage apartments or secondary dwelling units where the deed restrictions are not allowed, and reduce parking for smaller units, market-based parking, and proximity to transit. So these are all the things that committee has already worked on. And I just wanted to present as a gist of what we have accomplished so far. Next slide, please. So in the current discussion, we are going to talk about revisions to narrow lot development standards. And the purpose is to improve pedestrian safety, improve drainage and detention, not having impervious cover within the right-of-way, preserve on-street parking for neighborhoods. And we'll also talk about the recommendations for our standards for courtyard style developments. So that's what we're discussing today and going forward. Next slide, please. So what are the goals and what are we trying to address with this? I'm jumping into my topic, which is recommendations for narrow lots. So with these recommendations, what is the goal we are trying to achieve? One is to encourage alley access and shared driveway access for single family residential lots, to reduce the number of driveways and improve safety and preserve on-street parking, and reduce impact on the stormwater detention in the public right-of-way. Those are some of the goals which we had in mind while we are thinking about the recommendations. Next slide, please. You have seen this slide before. So while we think about any changes, we want to make sure we have all of the avenues open, all the opportunity that we have in the ordinance already, and we want to think through those while we make recommendations. So you have looked at this slide and you also have given us input during the preliminary idea stage where we talked about what can we do about flag lots, what changes need to be done for shared driveway requirements, how do we improve the policies related to alley access, and other ideas such as one-car garages and narrow driveways. All of the different things that are listed here we have considered. And now we will jump into the recommendations. So here are the draft proposed recommendations for narrow lot subdivisions. If the property is abutting an alley, access must be coming from the alley. And this is, before I go into it, I know this is a lot of text on the slide. And to make it easy, I'm going to break this down in the next few slides. Even though they're all put together here for one slide, I have broken them down. And also when it comes to the standards and general provisions, I put them separately here. Provisions, incentives, basically, if we want to encourage a certain style of development, we also want to make sure that there are some provisions to encourage the thought process and to encourage the recommendations we are making. And that's what these general provisions are. Next slide, please. Sorry, yeah, these are the provisions or incentives that will be allowed when rear access is taken. Next slide, please. Here is a flow chart. I know you can't read this. This flow chart, what it shows is if a property owner is developing a property, based on this flow chart, you can follow and figure out what type of development you're doing, what size, what is the kind of proposal you're making, what is the size of the site, and how the access to the property is available. That's what this flow chart is showing. And this is also uploaded on the website for reference. However, I'm going to, in next through slides, go through them individually. So please don't try to read this. It's impossible. But we will make all of this information available to the public, and committee members already received it. Next slide, please. So this is where we start with the recommendations. If the property is abutting an alley, require access from alley or shared driveway connection or shared driveway connecting to the alley. And this requirements comes along with certain incentives or provisions. And those provisions include higher density and reduced building lines, And if flag lots are used, that flag lots can have a narrow paving width, and the lot width and lot size averaging could be used, and allowing structures to encroach into the 15 by 15 visibility triangle above 10 feet. And the curb radius measurement can be done along the right of way. So those are the incentives for allowing alley access. Next slide, please. If the property is not abutting an alley, however, the property owner is creating lots 40 feet or wider, the individual driveway will be allowed from the property for the property as long as there is an uninterrupted curb space of 22 feet. And 1/3 of the structure facing the street must be habitable space. And again, this also allows all provisions. All provisions includes reduced parking and all of the higher density and reduced building lines. All of those requirements will apply. In this example, you can see in the pictures that there is a lot of room on the street for on-street parking, and also the structure is facing the street with the front door. It is also possible to have narrow driveways, like in the second image, you can see that there is more than likely this is a 12 feet or a 14 feet drive, and then it flares up within the property, but still there is a front door facing the street. So these are examples, and in the design modeling, you can see that there could be 1 unit on the site, or there could be 2 units on the site taking access from that same one drive. This gives an opportunity to have 2 units on the site, which is 40 feet or more wider. Next slide, please. If the property is not abutting an alley and the property owner is creating lots less than 40 feet wide, however, the property size, the overall property size is less than 15,000 square feet, there are different options. Require shared driveway, flag lots, PAE, or take access from the PAE. All of these options are available, and here you can see in the image how the development can happen with a shared driveway, with a flag lot, and in the modeling you can see that all of the garages can face towards the shared driveway, and similarly for the flag lots. Next slide, please. If the property is not abutting an alley, but creating lots less than 40 feet wide, however, the property size is less than 15,000 square feet, and it's neither a corner property or a double fronted property, then there is an option to use shared driveways or front loaders, but there is also a second option, which is to use common drives. That means one drive that comes from the public streets serves 2 properties, because these are narrow lots. In essence, what we're doing is the same one drive that used to serve the one property that's being subdivided now will serve 2 properties using the same drive. And in the images, you can see that the one drive is serving both the properties. One of the changes is to increase the building line, garage building line from 17 feet to 19 feet. Next slide, please. If the property is not abutting an alley and creating lots less than 40 feet, property at the corner or double fronting property that is 10,000 square feet or larger will be required to do shared driveways or flag lots or PAEs, and all of the provisions apply. Again, those provisions include reduced parking, market-based parking near transit, and also higher density, and reduced building lines. All of those are part of the provisions to allow or to encourage this kind of development. In all of these images, you can see how the properties are served from the side or rear through shared driveways. Next slide, please. If the property is not abutting an alley and creating lots less than 40 feet wide, but the property size is 15,000 square feet or larger, the requirement is that a property must take access from shared driveways, flag lots, or PAEs, and all provisions apply. And the development will look like this if the access comes from the rear, and that will help have on-street parking, no cars parked to block the sidewalks, and reduce the detention will be reduced in the right of way. Drainage and detention impervious cover will be reduced. Next slide, please. So all of these, again, it's the same slide, putting all of the information together, and I want to move to the next slide. So in provisions, I kept talking about general provisions and additional provisions. So the concept behind this is if the property is taking access from the front and if the driveway is serving two properties, then the general provisions will apply, like reduce parking, market-based parking, and simpler permitting process. And there will be standard templates for common access agreement to maintain that common access. So all of this will help encourage the development. However, what we really want is for the access to come from the back. So when a property owner is deciding to take access from the back or rear through alleys or through shared driveways or PAEs, along with the general provisions, the property owner will benefit from these additional provisions, which are increased density of 35 dwelling units per acre, and reduce building lines anywhere from 0 feet to 5 feet. Flag lots can maintain a staff width of anywhere from 12 feet to 20 feet, but the access must be shared among the properties. Lot size and lot width averaging will be allowed. So the lots could be narrower than 20 feet, which is the requirement in the ordinance today. Encroachment into the 15 by 15 visibility triangle will be allowed 10 feet and above. Today it's 20 feet. The change is we're changing that to 10 feet along local streets and collector streets. Next slide, please. So with that, I think I'm ready for questions. Again, this is the same flow chart to show what size of lot and how it's developing and what incentives can be used. With that, I'm ready for questions. Next slide, please. Yep.
All right, Savita, thank you so very much. It's a great presentation. So subcommittee members, I will remind you now, this is the opportunity for you to use the raise your hand feature to ask questions of Savita about the items that are in the recommendation. So again, I'll remind you that all of this we have seen before. This is just what we've, the planning staff has put together recommendations based on all the information that we've discussed. So let me go ahead and see. I saw Peter Friedman first, I believe, and then Curtis Davis. Peter?
Thank you. Savita, I just wanted to kind of run through a scenario and see kind of what the development would look like.
Okay, can we go to the flow chart, please?
So if it's a 50-foot regular wide, 100-foot deep lot, normal Houston lot, and you wanted to, and it was in the middle of the block, so you were kind of you have a choice of front loading. Your choice of a limit probably just a front loading. Do I understand it that you would have to use a common driveway at that point to be able to do two 25-foot lot subdivisions?
Yes, your understanding is correct. It's a common driveway approach, not the driveway through the property, just on the right of way. So let me see which slide will help you get an image of that. That's slide number 18. If we can go to slide number 18. So in this image, you can see that the one drive is serving both the subdivided lots, which is the 25 by 100 lots. In essence, the concept is the original lot had one driveway. So you continue to use that same drive, and the drive can be as wide as 24 feet at the right of way, and then you can flare it up more if you want. But at the right of way, it will be 24 feet. So the example will, the pictures are shown here to show how it can work. And the garage building line will be 19 feet.
Is there enough room on either side of that driveway to park as well? On the street?
Just for two, if it's only 50 by 100 lot, then you're left with 9 feet outside of this driveway approach. You're left with 9 feet on either sides. If you have a similar lot on the other side, then in between two 50 by 100 lots, you will save one spot. And then if you have more lots continued like that, then you'll have more room as they pair up.
Okay, so if it was just a single 50-foot lot, you wouldn't gain a parking spot. You'd have to have something additional on the other side.
Yes.
Unless you offset the driveway towards one side or the other.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I was about to say that if the driveway approach is pushed to one side, then it's possible to preserve one parking space. And this has been thought through a little bit more. And we want to, this is the recommendation we came up with, because this helps the current properties to develop that they were developing. However, if they pair up, then there will be still room for on-street parking. So it kind of helps both the goals. That was the thought process behind it.
And that is a 20-foot minimum common approach?
No, maximum 24. That means 12 feet on each lot, pretty much, with a 4-foot curb radius. Maximum is 24. The minimum could be 20, 18, how much ever works.
Okay, so there hasn't been a decision on what the minimum could be at this point?
No.
Okay, all right, well, thank you.
You're
All right,
welcome.
thank you. Our next speaker I show is Curtis Davis. Mr. Davis.
Good afternoon. Sonny, I'm present.
Oh, yes, I've got you. Thank you, sir.
But first off, thanks to the staff for pulling this work together and doing the flow chart. I think that's very helpful. And just a recommendation that, as in the example that Peter just put forward, if in some of your materials that you pull together to describe these changes, you actually suggest a scenario and then highlight through the flow chart the steps one might follow under that particular scenario would really help communicate this. I think it's really good. Some people aren't as good with flow charts and that kind of scenario, kind of walking through. I think 2 or 3 examples will assist those who aren't as good with reading flow charts, with seeing what the options are. And finally, there is an option, and I don't know how many cities are doing it, but I know that some have considered it, to take this information and treat it like architects treat parametric design, where you have specific parameters, and that if you put in a set of conditions, essentially a design will come out, a pattern will come out as a set of options. And the same could be true with these options, particularly when you're dealing with neighborhoods that are concerned with parking, and you can show impacts or minimal impacts on parking in communities, because I think that's the #1 concern that many neighborhood residents will have with increasing density impact on parking. But other than that, I think you guys have done it.
All right, thank you, sir.
May I comment, Chair, may I comment on that?
Director
So
Wells, right ahead.
Hi. I want to go back to both of those comments and questions. And Savita, if you could have someone go to the flag lot scenario, I would like to also point something out. So I know Peter was asking about parking on either side of the
Slide 17, please. Thank you.
single entrance for this, the side-by-side narrow lots.
Mm.
If in order to even maximize on-street parking more, that's not the one I was thinking about.
Okay.
Well, okay, yes, I guess. In order to maximize parking on the street more, instead of dividing that 5,000 square foot lot sideways, what we're doing is incentivizing a flag lot setup where there is a front house and a back house, and that way we maximize on-street parking even more. And there are some added provisions if this is the way the lot is divided instead of side by side.
Yes, Director, thank you for that clarification.
All right. Is that it, Margaret?
Yes, that's it.
Okay, great. Just making sure. All right. I have Mike Dishberger next. Mike.
Yes, of course, I have some questions. A lot of it is technical. So we were given a handout about an hour or so before the meeting, and some of the terminology just want to get clarification on, or I'd like to make a slight change to it. For instance, it was on general standards, basically. It said on lots narrower than 40 feet on property smaller than 15,000 feet. I like it to be less 15,000 feet or less, 15,000 feet or less. And then right below that, kind of going the opposite way, it says 10,000 square feet or greater on the same second paragraph. And I like to be greater than 10,000. The reason being, all these lots are 25 by 100s. The city of Houston's loaded with them. 50 by 100s, everything's 100. And so two minor things I don't think are big, but I like to get that incorporated because these kind of technical things kill builders later on. So I'd like to look at that. Your drawing showed a 20-foot wide driveway. We said we go up to 24. So I assume that's just an example. It could be 24 if wanted. And I see we're sticking with the 4-foot curb. Is there a reason why we don't go to a 2-foot curb? It doesn't cost me any more money to do either one. It just seems more logical to do a 2-foot curb. Could be a public works thing. The other thing was, we'll get to Alley's last. The question, I know we're trying to get some more on-street parking. So what I would like to see happen if we are going to do these common drives, okay? So with 24, we might be able to make it work, all right? So I'm not being negative, right? We can make that work. But what I would like to see is if there's no parking signs on that side, that those signs come down. That I don't want to do all this on-street parking and they're not allowed to use it. And it just seems like a lot of neighborhoods have on both sides of the road. In fact, a lot of those areas you asked us to walk, Savita, they had no parking signs on both sides. Then those who actually had no signs had rocks in their front yard. But we can address rocks later, but I would think if we're trying to get more guest parking, that those signs come down because we're now providing some parking, okay? So those are some suggestions. And the last thing is on alleyways. The first paragraph under general standards. I'm a little bit confused because we talk about if it's less than 40 feet, you must use the alleyway. But if the alleyway is garbage, the city wants us to rebuild the entire thing, and nothing will ever happen because you can't rebuild an alleyway. I thought we had talked the last meeting about any accepted alleyway. So if the city's accepted the alleyway, by all means, we should use the alleyway for access. I can speak for builders on that. If there's a city maintained alleyway and there's a whole laundry list on the website that those you have to use it. But if it's an alleyway that Public Works is going to decide yay or nay on, that's a huge unknown, and you don't buy property with huge unknowns. And really, we always go back to the alleyways. This is a biggie. All the builders in Houston would love to use alleyways. It's just that we don't know what we're supposed to do today. And I see we're trying to work on some common diagrams and things, but it'd be like more certainty. I think they're doing an inventory of alleyways. Hey, this alleyway is a good alleyway. This one's a bad one. Don't buy it, you know? But it's a little confusing because on paragraph 1, you talk about everyone should use it. Then like the third paragraph, it says, if you're adjacent to an unimproved alley, you can do certain other things. So a little more clarity because it looks, they're kind of mixed together and I'm unsure which one really prevails. And those are my comments right now.
Thank you, Mike. Savita, did you want to respond to anything that Mike had said before we move forward?
Yes, thank you for your comments, Mike, and point noted about the 10,000 and the 15,000. I do would like to discuss some of the comments you made about alleys. the one thing, at least I can explain the document that I produced. So the alley access concept is, if the property is adjacent to alley, properties must use alley, unless if the property is mid-block, or the alley is unimproved. In those situations, then we are encouraging shared driveway if the property is 15,000 square feet or more. If not, common driveways is possible. We do want to encourage alley access for corner properties, because that is the start where, if the right of way already exists, even though it is unimproved, if it's a corner property of properties at the corner of an alley and a street, then that is the first opportunity for us to get started on the alley. So in those situations, we do want to encourage alley access. I would like our director to pitch in if there is anything I missed in responding.
No, thank you, Savita. This is Margaret again. No, there's nothing you missed in responding, but I do think that this is what I was referring to this morning, or this morning, earlier in the meeting, when I said we are really working closely with. We've had better conversations with Public Works in the past several weeks than we've had in a long time about alleys. And so we continue to collaborate with them and continue to try to find a solution to this problem. They understand that the planning department really would like, and Mike, what you said, developers really do want to use alleys. Nobody doesn't want to use an alley. They just understand how complicated it is to be able to. And so we're working closely with the Office of the City Engineer to try to establish some very standard ways in which property owners can understand what the alley is, how accessible the alley is, what does the word improved mean versus not improved, all of these to establish standards so that nobody is blindsided and everybody kind of has a sense going in what would be expected. We understand certainty is important, and that's what we're working on with them.
All right, thank you, Director Wallace Brown. I show Neil Dykeman has your hand up. Neil.
Yes, Sonny. Cool. So we had a couple of things. Number one, I think I'm a little slow. I'm trying to follow the general versus general and additional. So can you walk me through this flow chart again? What is, when I'm looking at this chart here, what is current rule and what is changed rule and what is changed with an if-then statement?
Okay. The first thing is, this flow chart doesn't have anything about what is the current rule.
Okay.
What this is showing is, if the first, let's start at the top. I have a property that I want to develop. If you're keeping the existing lot and developing it, you can develop under the current rules. So that's the left side portion. Now let's come to the right side.
And then you've got an or there, if I'm following. That's an or common drives with a 19-foot limit to qualify for the general provisions, and that was the left side of your other chart. So
okay.
Is that what I'm following? If I don't want to use current rules on an existing lot and I use a common drive, then I can pick up the new reductions in the left side of your chart, correct?
In the next page, which is the incentives, the general and additional incentives. Can we go back one slide, please?
Okay, yes. So on the or, if I go in an existing lot, if I go to if I do a common drive, I get to pick up the ones on the left if I want. That's
all of it.
Okay, gotcha.
Yes. Yes. Now let's go back to the flow chart. So if I'm further subdividing the existing property that I have, then this flow chart tells you, is there an alley, how you need to develop. If there is no alley, but you're creating narrow lots, what you can do with the property based on the size of the property and how the access should come. And if you're doing shared driveway access or PAE or flag lot, then you get all of the provisions, which is parking incentives and also the density incentives. Versus if you're only doing common drives, you are still doing better than doing individual drives. So there is some incentives, but not the density or reduced building line incentives you won't get. So that's the gist of the whole.
Gotcha. Okay. So then I've got, so the general and additional, that's you're calling, that's the density. Yeah.
General incentives is only parking reductions and parking incentives.
Okay. So if I go to common drive, I have something called some general or these parking reductions. And
Yes.
if I can do more, I add more density, then I get the green, which
Yeah.
I have an option to get the green, which is you call them density.
Both.
Yeah,
Then you
kickers.
get both. Then
Gotcha.
you get reduced parking and you get density and you get reduced building lines.
Okay, gotcha. And so to echo, I think Mike's comment on the alleys. So yes, that gets a lot more comfortable if the word accepted is in there.
Okay.
And I cannot imagine how long it will take to get an actual alley, standard thing, all the processes for that through, and even for the ones on the end. I'm a little unclear what, if you're the end guy and you're supposed to come back off the alley and the alley is semi or not improved, what exactly the standard is that the alley has to come to. Because right now it's supposed to come to be a city street. That's not the same as a driveway. So I got to build a whole street for 20 foot for just my house. If there's what I was hoping we would eventually see out of Public Works in this was a alley standard, which is not a street and not a driveway, or maybe it is just, it looks like a driveway, and a much simpler standard. Because if you do, once you do that, even if you're at the end, you're kind of on the hook for drainage stuff from all those people in the middle, and I don't know how that would be handled. So even on the end ones, and I think I was hoping, like Mike was saying, that we would see basically if you use the alley, then you pick up X, not if you're on an alley, you have to deal with that, at least until there is an alley framework that has been delivered, worked through and tested so that we can build on it, know even how to touch it. And so then I'm trying to kind of walk back. So I've got, and then flip to the right side, the abutting, so your mid block, no alley. So my Victor lots, I think, fall straight into this. Margaret, you can tell me if I'm missing that, where I got 5 lots. They're 50 foot by 80, and we're going to split them in half. So they're going to be 25, and they got tandem driveways along each one of them. And in my case, I'm just trying to split them in half and add a house behind them, or not house, add some square footage. And the only reason we got to split them in half is because we got to get it's above the ADU limit, which I don't think it would after you pass the other restrictions. I think I would be able to pick that up, but I'm a little unclear. These aren't 40 foot wide lots. These are 25 foot. Yeah. So there's certainly no room for a shared, I don't think.
Common drive is the option.
Neil, Neil, this is Margaret. Couldn't you put a common drive along the back property line?
They're not, the earlier speaker's comment was those are hundreds. These aren't hundreds. These are 80s.
Okay.
So there's no room. Well, if you're doing new development, you might be able to. My project can't, but a new project possibly could squeeze enough space in there. So I guess what I'm just trying to wrap my head around is, so where on that flow chart does these, we'll call them super narrow lots, if you're calling 40 a narrow lot, fit in this thing? And what is the goal there for the rules?
Okay, so if the lots are 40 feet or less wider, so this says if the lots are less than 40 feet wide, anywhere from 25 feet to 40 feet, then in subdividing those, not for the existing, only for future subdivide lots that you're planning to subdivide, the plan is to have them use common drives instead of having 2 16 feet individual drives or having 2 individual 12 feet drives. Just club them together like this at the right of way, and then you go into the properties like that and flaring up. So that's that way there is not much too many interruptions to the sidewalks or in the right of way, and one driveway will be able to split individually into each property. That plan will work for your development, I think.
Neil, we're going to have to look at your site plan a little bit closer because you don't have 19-foot setbacks, I don't think.
They're 13
Yeah.
historically there.
So I appreciate your interest in this. Can we take this offline?
Yes, I was just trying to understand just how it would fit, not for that project, but for others, what it might imply. But I think I'm beginning to figure it out.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So I guess I want to make sure that we all have a general understanding of what's being discussed here. So I want to make sure that one of the things is, and I think all of you have touched on it, is predictability. And so as the director has said, you know, we are working with Public Works to make sure that we can provide you standards and predictability. Without those two things, any development would not be possible. So I just want to reassure you, as Margaret did at the beginning of this meeting, that we are doing that work in the back, so to speak, back of shop, and making sure that all of these things align with all the different city departments to make sure that we can afford you standards and predictability. So any other questions before we go forward? I don't see any. Mike, you have another comment?
Just again, quick comment on the alleyways, because we say we're going to be working with Public Works. It doesn't have to be Mike Dishberger, but we need to have a builder or developer part of that discussion, because they know the ins and outs of what goes on at permitting and what needs to be done. If it's done in a vacuum, it's gonna be a lot more pleasant for everybody if we just have somebody there representing builders, developers, and someone says something, well, what about this? What about this? So all these little issues get worked out. And unfortunately, there's lots of issues when you touch those alleyways. So that was my only comment.
Absolutely, understood. Peter Friedman.
I know earlier on we had a discussion about maybe using smaller setbacks as an incentive. Is that still on the table for maybe rear load or for any of these other options?
Yes,
0
sir.
to 5. Savita, correct?
Yes, 0 to 5 feet, provided that there is adequate room in the right of way for sidewalks and safety buffer and utilities. Yes, you can reduce the building line up to anywhere from 0 to 5 feet.
Which in my mind is real plus, right?
Sir?
Yes. No, I just said which in my mind is a real plus. That's a big change.
Yes, and that comes with additional density, which is also a plus.
Right, 35 units per acre, yes. All right, I don't have anyone else. I'm not seeing anyone else with their hand up. Is anyone else on the committee wanting to make any kind of commentary before we move forward?
Sonny, can I have a follow-up on that?
Go right ahead.
The setbacks is great. That's great news. What I was wondering, if you're on a corner lot, I know that there's different setbacks when you're talking about different, I guess, traffic flow patterns on different streets. They have different setbacks.
Mm-hmm.
Could that be applied to some of those as well?
For major thoroughfares, the building line will still remain 25 feet. But for local streets and collector streets, there is an opportunity to reduce the building line. And if it's an intersection of local and collector street, and this is, I'm speaking from my mind, is if it's local and collector street, we would encourage the access or the shared driveway to come from the local street. And then there will be opportunity to reduce the building lines along the collector street and the local street, both. Obviously, all of this comes with the front doors facing the street and all of the pedestrian visibility and everything.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. Anyone else before we move on? All right, then, Savita, let's go ahead and move on to the next item on the agenda.
Before we move on, Mr. Chair, is it okay to assume consensus, or do we want to call for consensus on these recommendations with the suggestions made?
Yeah, I think we can do that. I think based on the discussions that we've had, it sounds like our speakers, Mr. Friedman, Mr. Davis, Mr. Dishberger, Dykeman, and Nightingale want to see some tweaks to the things that are added and really kind of need a guarantee that we are in fact doing what we're doing, which is working with Public Works. As Mike Dishberger said, you know, having someone there, I don't know what the stand is of the department will be, but to have someone who is, quote, boots on the ground to be able to ask those questions before decisions are made, and then have to go back and revise. But ladies and gentlemen, unless I hear a negative, I would think that we could move forward to having consensus from this committee. All right, then, hearing none, I think that that is our consensus. And again, some things definitely need to be looked at and tweaked and perhaps revisited. But with all that in mind, that is for Savita and the department to go back and make those changes and ask those questions. Thank you. Savita.
Thank you, sir. The next item on the agenda is to talk about courtyard style developments. And I want to invite Tammy Williamson to talk about this item. She's very experienced, has been working very closely with me on all livable places related items. So here she comes, Tammy. She's going to share her screen herself.
Tammy, would you unmute?
Thank you for that. Okay, now can everybody see the screen as being shown?
Yes, ma'am.
Perfect. Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Tammy Williamson with planning staff. Section 4 of today's agenda is to present to you staff's recommendation for courtyard style development as an additional optional performance standard. Preliminary ideas to this style of development were discussed in the April Livable Places Committee meeting. Just like the previous section, we are seeking consensus for the following recommendations. Not on my presentation. Here we go. Okay. I'll go through the specific provisions in the next slides, but the performance standard criteria in general allow for relaxed lot size, lot width, density, and parking requirements while requiring a usable common courtyard space. This style of development is different from multifamily development in that the land would be subdivided for individual ownership with agreement for the common areas. The performance standards that we are recommending are: the lots would have no limit, minimum or maximum, for lot size or lot width. There is a maximum property depth of 150 feet per the fire marshal's recommendation. Lots would be allowed to have sole frontage on a public street, a common drive, an alley, a permanent access easement known as a PAE, or the required courtyard space. Pedestrian access must be provided to the courtyard space and common parking areas. Lots with frontage on the public street must also provide a direct pedestrian connection to the street sidewalk. The subdivision will have no maximum density. This is similar to how multifamily developments are not restricted by density. The courtyard style of development would also be able to take advantage of the broad changes proposed across the board for lots, as discussed by Savita earlier, of one required parking space per lot, or market-based if falling within the distances of high-frequency transit or bike lanes. Parking spaces would not be required to be within the lot themselves, although certainly can be, but would need to be located on-site within the subdivision. The criteria for the required courtyard space would be that at least 50% of the lots within the subdivision must have at least half of their frontage on the courtyard or courtyards if multiple. As shown in the image, 7 of the 14 lots have frontage on the courtyard space. One of the 7 has dual frontage on both the street and the courtyard. Construction would be required to have an active front on the courtyard, the public street, alley, or shared common drive by a porch, door, window, etc. And if proposing a fence, it would need to be a shorter and semi-transparent fencing. The semi-active side for dual frontage lots would have covered patio, deck, windows, etc., and would be allowed a full height, but still semi-transparent fencing. So in this case, the The lot that is the double front that is at the edge of the courtyard, which has frontage on the street, that would be allowed to have a full height fence, but still semi-transparent looking into the courtyard and the courtyard, for the visibility. The minimum courtyard size would be determined by at least 150 square feet per lot within the subdivision, no less than 12 feet in width, and no less than 480 square feet in contiguous area. A minimum of 20 feet is required between structures on the courtyard. These provisions will help to ensure the common courtyard space is of sufficient size to be usable and accessible to the residents. The courtyard style performance standards would permit a 5-foot building line along the local or collector street, and the active front of the structures mentioned on the previous slide would be required to have occupiable space. Parking is permitted on the side or the rear. Vehicular access would be from an alley, shared driveway, or PAE, and individual driveways to the public street for each lot would not be permitted. The maximum building height would be 30 feet, in essence a 2 to 2.5 story structure. The preliminary modeling shown here illustrates that the roof pitch for slope roofs would vary depending on the width of the structure, thus changing the overall height. Here is a visual combination of the performance standard provisions in a schematic site plan view, illustrating the driveway and parking dimensional constraints, building lines, frontage and active space, and courtyard requirements. The following images are examples of courtyard spaces. The image on the left shows porches and balconies. The image on the right has large windows onto a more densely landscaped courtyard. These two images are the same development, but showing their courtyards from the public streets. These courtyards feature community usable space such as barbecue and picnic areas, just to get some ideas of what could be possible. The following preliminary modeling shows various configurations of mid-block alley access or no alley, corner lots, and overall different subdivision sizes using 100 by 100. As you can see here, just different pieces, and 100 by 150 to begin to get an idea of what fits and what is possible. The units per acre could also increase with any of the lots proposing duplexes. This is just, you can kind of see the site coverage area if you're doing permeable parking or drives, the different parking spaces, units per acre. This is just a way to kind of understand what could fit and different configurations of the different lots. And then, are there any questions?
All right, thank you, Tammy. I appreciate that. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and start. And I apologize, I'm not calling you necessarily in order, but the first hand I see is Neil Dykeman. Neil, go ahead. You'll be followed by Mike Dishberger, and then I'll make a list. Go ahead.
So Tammy, I think I really like this concept. I've lived in things similar to it, and I wanted to make sure I'm wrapping my head around what's new. Yeah, so essentially this is permitting me to separate out a fee lot that doesn't have access to a road thing.
Correct.
Yeah, this isn't even a shared drive. This is essentially divorcing where my parking is, because I still have a parking requirement from my lot itself. And that's what's really kind of new in the tool. And then if I am to do that, I simply need to follow a number of criteria that you have laid out. Is that how I should think about this proposal?
Yes, absolutely. So This is a performance standard. There's nothing required, but if you're wanting to do this, like these lots here, they don't have any other frontage except for along a courtyard. And that in current ordinance would not be permitted.
The orientation of my units and the number of units, I can now take a minimum lot to 30 square feet. If I,
sure.
It's exaggerating, but the minimum in this configuration, a minimum lot size is gone, so I can use it for a tiny home,
Exactly.
layout. That's the thinking
So
here.
yeah, so the minimum lot size is essentially what is developable. What
Right.
construction are you proposing? What will fit?
Okay, and so what? And as I said, I think I really like this concept as a tool. What is kind of the key governing restriction then? Because there's no dense. I can do whatever density I want. Because you remove the maximum density. I've got a parking requirement, so that still governs a bit what I can do. And then I have you've given me better setbacks if I do this. So you've increased my flexibility. So this is my so I've got a parking setback and a courtyard, a green space requirement. Those are really the things that you have used as the governor for the structure. Is that correct?
Exactly. The predominant
The
is
height.
and then the
And
height.
height.
Yeah,
Yes,
that
okay.
you wouldn't be able to do really tall structures that create kind of a very narrowed view of things. So it keeps it down at pedestrian level more. And then the courtyard spaces, and then obviously the parking is just how the parking works. But the courtyard space is the governing tool in this whole thing, is how much space is required based on how many lots you're doing. And it doesn't even need to be one contiguous courtyard space. If you're doing a couple of smaller ones, it at least still needs to be 480 square feet to make it a usable space that's an experience. And then it's just that at least half of the lots are fronting on the courtyard space. So you can't push the courtyard space to some obscure corner and just have lots that are completely surrounded by other homes.
So I hope we have a committee member that has done some work similar to this, that they can kind of provide more detailed comments on what restrictions would show up. But I think the overall structure creates a really interesting, new flexible tool.
Okay. Thank you so much. I show Mike Dishberger is next, followed by Megan Sigler.
I like the concept too. I'm agreeing. I just had a couple questions. On the mid-block, I think the previous diagram, you had a mid-block. Is there a way to, you see the one on the left? Is there a way to get Public Works to allow a 2-foot in-turn in this situation? Because that's kind of a crazy driveway. You come in and you make this, you have to be 4 feet from the property line, and all of a sudden you shoot back. You see right there where your mouse is? It's just, it looks really weird. And what people are going to do is try to put more concrete there. I don't think that's the purpose here, to have more concrete. That seems like a simple thing on this particular example. Also, you mentioned on, Tammy, you mentioned on requirements on these one space in the courtyard. You had a list of stuff: windows, porches, decks, covered patios. I assume those are examples. You don't have to have all those. You don't have to have a porch or a covered patio, correct?
Correct. Yeah, it's just something active, something that engages that courtyard space or the street space.
Can you put the word, okay, again, these things come technical, or on those things? Yeah, a mixture of one at least one of these items must be present, because this is a good idea. And I'm asking my last question. It's a silly question, because I know what the reasoning is. I saw something in the Heights done a few years ago. They did kind of a courtyard thing, but they had their parking off the street. It was like single parking. I thought it was pretty cool because they had some cool landscaping going on. I forgot what street it was on, 25th, 24th or something. And I assume the reason for that is you're trying not to have the cuts in the street, but at the same time, I think you end up having a lot less concrete on the property. So I would only ask that you possibly look at that. We could have some parking up, head-in parking, not parallel parking, head-in, that could be used by everybody in the neighborhood, I guess, and plus your people. I don't know. Just, it seems like a more efficient design. The courtyard thing is pretty cool. We've thought about this, but the rules we have now don't allow you to do it. So these rules would help a bunch on doing those kind of things. That's all.
Were you asking to consider head-in parking off of the right-of-way?
Yes, I am.
Okay, and as opposed to parallel, which is kind of these that we were showing.
Right, you would end up burning some of your own land to do that, but that would provide parking for other people on the street. Also, head-in parking, you get a lot more parking than parallel. Again, just an option. Not to say a builder is going to do that, because they may want to probably control the parking so that their people all have parking places. So I don't like the L-shaped one. It just, when I see that, I see lots and lots of concrete, and that's lots and lots of detention. I do like that you can do permeable pavers. That seems like that's something that you pointed out here. That's good also. So, overall, it's a good idea. I think, again, so a few tweaks here and there to make it better.
All right. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Tammy. Megan Sigler, you are next. And I remind those of you who are not subcommittee members that the raise your hand feature is only for committee members. If you would like to speak or have a comment, please put your information in the chat and we'll call you at the end of the meeting. Megan.
Thanks. I just want to say, staff, the exhibits today are wonderful and really appreciate it and the level of detail that you all went to. My question, and I love this courtyard idea too. My question is on platting and I guess conveyance of land. Is your thought that the lots will be managed by an HOA, or are you thinking that they would be sold with a home? And then if so, how would that be conveyed?
You're not actually talking the lots, you're talking about the common areas, the courtyard?
Well, not the courtyard, the parking spaces.
Oh, the parking.
Yes, so you've got your lots that will be, I'm guessing, lots 1 through 8, block 4 on the plat. And then would the parking spaces be a parking reserve that is managed by an HOA? Or would they be tied to an individual lot? And it might be that there's multiple answers or multiple scenarios, but just wondered what you were all thinking.
Yeah, so there are options. Let me find. So like potentially you can do parking underneath the property or adjacent to the lot if you wanted to include the 1 parking space per unit within the lot itself, as long as it's not one of the active fronts. Otherwise, it would be part of a common area, so that would be governed by an HOA. It would be divorced of the single family lot. So optional.
Optional. Okay. I'm curious, do any of the other builders have ideas on what they would, what they think would be successful, if it would be just a common area managed by an HOA, or if you would somehow want to assign the parking to a lot?
I think you have to assign the parking to each lot when you convey the deed. Put in the HOA documents, of course.
All right, and for the recording, that was Mike Dishberger. Anyone else wants to chime in on Megan Sigler's question before I go on to the next speaker?
Yeah, I'm curious if I can put Peter on the spot, just as a is a parking spot for what you're building, is it as valuable as maybe it is for Mike Dishberger's company?
I think it's definitely valuable. I think you could do it as a limited common element through an HOA, so it is assigned and it conveys with the sale. I think the only issue we've ever had really when it comes to this type of development is where the parking is related to the home. If people are, for safety reasons and weather reasons, they want to have their parking as close to their property as they can. But other than that, I love these type of designs. I think they're innovative. I think they're definitely a way to kind of have a different living lifestyle than a typical apartment. It's a good setup. I did have a question on the alley. Is that a public alley, or are you proposing a private alley there?
That would be if it's an existing public alley that's shown here. But I mean, it could be either, really, that if you want to propose an alley, but that's similar to if you were doing a shared driveway off of the street and then coming down.
And then the pervious elements you have there, is that to offset the impervious cover, or is that just for better drainage?
So you're talking about if you were doing the permeable parking and drives?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. So we had some questions at the previous meeting, and then also just amongst the discussions, that when we were starting to get up and over the 60% coverage, that is the current IDM requirement for providing detention, that if there are ways to offset that. And so this is to kind of show that if you were going to do permeable surfaces for the drive or the parking, that this can help, get your numbers down for the current IDM requirements.
Is that a full offset or is that just a partial offset?
What do you mean by that?
Does it count as a half? If you have a 1 foot piece of impervious cover, that's one square foot. Would a permittable one have like a 0.5 rating, or how does that work? Or is that, am I going too far in the weeds right now?
You want to
It's a
take
little
it?
weedy to me.
Yeah,
I think we might take that separately.
Sorry, did I talk over you? Sorry about that.
Go ahead, Savita.
We did discuss the permeability and the calculations and permeable parking. It is not 1:1. There is a specific calculation in the IDM which allows for a separate calculation for permeable parking surfaces, and that calculation will be used, but it is definitely not 1:1.
Okay, so
Thank
we'll
you.
take that separately and probably apart from this one meeting because that's a technical issue. But yeah, definitely important. All right, so I show Matthew Camp as the next speaker to be followed by Kathy Payton. Matthew.
Yeah, I just want to say I really like these design options. I think it's great to have this flexibility. My one comment would be to, instead of limiting the height, put the restriction on the number of stories to give them a little greater flexibility, especially in areas where it's flood prone and you may have to build the building up 4 to 5 feet just to start on the base floor. So that's my only comment.
All right, thank you. We'll keep that in mind. Kathy Payton, you are next.
Hey, just to comment, just in terms of some of the inner city challenges that we have in keeping down confusion, we are actually probably more interested in parking opportunities that would assign parking. I know that on some of our developments now, it's one of the greatest sources of our complaints and confusion and chaos. And so I would just suggest and recommend that we would look at ways that would invite and encourage the assigned parking as opposed to the HOAs.
Okay. All right. Thank you so very much. All right. Committee members, anyone else before we move forward?
Curtis Davis, hand is raised.
Oh, thank you. Mr. Davis, I did not see you. Please go right ahead, please.
That's okay. Just a recommendation as you roll this out to the city and to the communities. It might be useful to get a few of the members who are builders, like Mike or Peter or others who haven't been involved, along with community residents from some of the super neighborhoods, in a kind of a panel discussion, and for the city to select 2 or 3 sites that could be prototypes for this type of development or any of the other issues that we have, and just have a conversation as to how it would be laid out, how it would be developed, and what the issues are from the developer's point of view and from the community's point of view, as a way to both educate everyone about the standards that are being put forward, and to also have both the building community and the residential or resident community have a safe dialogue with people aren't necessarily fighting and shouting at each other, but can kind of hear each other's points of view and have that discussion. I know the builders hear it all the time, and every time they do a project, they hear it, and residents have their gripes and they're in their separate camps. And this might be an opportunity not to just deal with the regulations, but also deal with the relationships.
All right. Thank you, Curtis. Appreciate that. By the way, I volunteer you to head up that meeting, by the way, just so you know. All right.
I'd be willing to take it on as a citizen.
There you go. Good.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. All right. Tammy, I don't show anyone else with their hand up. To you.
I do not see anybody else.
All right. Anyone else on the committee have any comments or questions before we move forward for Tammy? All right, then. I would say then, Savita, you were asking for general consensus on this item as well, were you not?
Yes, sir.
All right, so I will go ahead and make that statement out. General consensus, not a vote, but just is there anyone that has any questions that would, quote, keep us from moving forward with what you've been presented to today? All right, I would say that counts as consensus. let's move
Thank
forward.
you.
Thank you, Tammy.
Thank you, Tammy. Okay, do we move on to the next item on the agenda?
Please.
Yes, so it is homework activities by Lynn Hansen.
Thank you, Savita, and thank you, Savita, and thank you, Chairman Garza. And good afternoon, committee members. The homework for today will be related to the conversation that we've heard today. There have been lots of comments about the recommendations on narrow lots and the recommendations on courtyard style developments. Over the next few days, we will place online these two recommendations so that you can take a look at them, and a short survey that you can provide comments on those two recommendation items. We will get those up by the end of the week, so please check back with us by the weekend. Those items will be online, and Savita, should that be for 2 weeks or longer?
It will be for longer. We can leave them out for a month to get all of the feedback and give enough time for the community to weigh in. And if anybody has questions, we'll be happy to discuss more and hear the concerns as well.
Thank you, Savita. So this survey will be open for not only the committee members, but for the general public. I urge you to visit letstalkhouston.org/livable-places. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Lynn. I appreciate that
Thank
very
you,
much.
Lynn.
That sounds like easy homework, actually. So thank you so very much. Savita, I think we're ready to move on to the next or the last agenda item, are we not?
Yes, sir, we are ready to move on. And I just want to mention that in the next meeting, we will be talking about more details and how to accomplish some of these requirements, changes to reserve standards and compensating open space reserve standards. So mostly we will be discussing reserves and their requirements in the next meeting on June 7th.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so very much. All right, then. So I guess our next item is public comment, is it not?
Yes, sir.
All right, so I only show two people in the chat. Well, two people in the chat. Who is handling chat today?
Tamara Fo is handling chat, sir.
Tamara, are you there?
Mr. Chair, I'm here. I have several speakers signed up to speak today.
Go right ahead, please.
Sure. So the first speaker I have is Joyce Owens, O-W-E-N-S.
All right, Ms. Owens, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Good afternoon, Chairman, committee
afternoon.
members.
Right
My
ahead,
name is
please.
Joyce. My name is Joyce Owens. Last name is O-W-E-N-S. I just have a couple of comments and concerns. One about the shared driveways. We have done some completed plats, and now that they're in for construction review, Public Works is requiring plan and profiles for shared driveways, which is adding a great financial burden to the developers, because typically in the past, shared driveways did not require plan and profile drawings, and that adds probably another at least 4 months to the construction review process. So if that's something we can look at with Public Works, and why they view that, even if it's not in the city right away, because it was my understanding from my years of doing permit expediting that that's when plan and profiles, but they're saying that there are multiple vehicles taking access from one driveway. So that is an additional cost. And I think we need to look at that, especially if you're trying to do some kind of affordable or even median income housing, how that really impacts the budget. And then also, I would, let's say, when you have a shared driveway and we're looking at doing shared driveways opposed to front loaders, I don't know that that's the most, the greatest idea for some neighborhoods for the shared driveways, because when you look at maybe the demographics, having to do an HOA with a whole committee for if you're going to do a HOA as is set out to be formed, and then each person has to pay into, you know, an account because the city is not going to take care of the driveways or any utilities or anything like that that's in the shared driveway. I think we should just kind of consider that instead of saying across the board, if that's feasible for every neighborhood. So those are my two on shared driveways. And then on the 15,000 square foot requirement for detention for residential developments. Now I have one person that we completed the plat and they want to sell the lots individually. They paid like probably $22,000 in impact fees. They're ready to sell the lots. Now they come back and say, you have to provide detention. And so they're getting very frustrated, some of my customers and clients and others that I've gotten feedback from. And so if we could look at that, I mean, if once you pay your impact fees and you get down to the end and then you have to provide detention, and is detention the best for a residential neighborhood? I always think about mosquitoes and just standing water. So if we had a rain situation and you have water and it takes time to drain, then you have one lot in the middle of a residential development that takes time to drain, then that's mosquitoes. That's just my thought on that. So if we could look at those options, and underground detention is quite expensive for just doing, you know, just a residential, and all these houses have are front loaders. So they all have, they sheet flow as far as the stormwater, and they still have to have a detention requirement. So I don't know if that's double dipping. That's double dipping, I don't know. But if we could look at that and maybe revisit that requirement.
Thank you, Ms. Owens. I appreciate that input. That's pretty specific, so I'm sure that we can look into those specific items for you. Thank you. All right.
Thank you. And the other items I'll submit to Savita.
All right. Thank you so very much. All right. I show Deborah Moran is next. Tamara, who do you show?
Yeah. Yes, I have her as well.
All right. Ms. Moran, are you there?
Yes. Is my microphone working for you?
It is. Yes. Go right ahead, please.
Terrific. Finally got that setting right. So I've written, very pleased to meet Ms. Bondi in person. And my question is, I was told by the Museum Park Super Neighborhood that right now the Livable Places Committee is handling things like lighting ordinances or lighting guidance for Houston. I actually think education does very well. And I'm becoming increasingly convinced that that education probably needs to come from the police. I have a website, softlighthouston.com, with some visuals on it, and it has convinced former police chief Art Acevedo to change lighting guidance online. But what I've found is that the rank and file police officers don't seem to know about that. So when I spoke to the Museum Park Super Neighborhood at the invitation of Kathleen O'Reilly, the president, the policeman who gave the security report, after his security report, recommended the brightest light possible, and the only downside you would need blackout shades, meaning he's actually recommending light trespass. Then he heard my talk and he completely turned around, and not only because we showed lighting at sites of auto pedestrian accidents where there was glare pointed at drivers, but and also glare interfering with security cameras, which he said was very important to them to have good video. But I was also struck that he even mentioned the health problems. So I didn't think a policeman would be as motivated by that, but that bothered him too. And so what I was wondering is, what has the Livable Places Committee determined about lighting so far? The person who attended was not able to say at that meeting. And if you haven't determined to use soft shielded lighting pointed downward, as Art Acevedo suggested, is there a way I might be able to meet with somebody, because we found showing people physically a difference in lighting is actually most effective. That's worked with everybody that I've met with.
All right. Well, thank you. And just to address that question, I think, Savita, and you can back me up here, the lighting that we've been talking about has mostly been in parking structures. That is the only lighting that we are addressing at this point in time. There are other ordinances that would affect that, I'm sure, but that is not under the purview of this subcommittee. Again, we're talking about neighborhoods and parking and mid-rises and high-rises and the effect of lighting would have on them. But just to answer your question, since you have been in touch with Savita Bondi, I'm sure she can direct you to some more pertinent information to give you not only answer the questions you have, but perhaps spread your information out to those who might be interested.
Well, in case it's relevant, the state of Texas has a law actually forbidding the regulation of building mounted lighting unless it's within the purview of homeowners associations or unless the city is actually applying for dark sky status, which is almost impossible for Houston. So if that makes a difference in how you structure your subdivisions and you want them to be able to have some control over their lighting so that people can sleep and yet have the safety and security they need, I suggest an HOA structure.
Of course. Thank you so very much. I appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
All right. Our next speaker.
The next speaker I have signed up is Mike Shelton, SHELTON.
All right. Mr. Shelton, are you with us?
Yes.
Go right ahead, please.
My name is Mike Shelton, SHELTON. I'm from the Heights. We've built, I don't know, almost 400 garage apartments. And by the way, thank you, planning, for all your hard work. There's a lot of work y'all put in for these meetings, so thank you so much. I guess my question is the committee going to address anything to help individuals, or is it just going to be developers trying to make, higher density developments to, for sales? Or are you guys going to start helping out, individuals that want to do an ADU or a garage apartment in the back of their lot? We're struggling with all the rules that have came up in the last 24 years since I've been in business. And do y'all have anything in place for helping out individuals, or are you only going to be helping developers?
Well, no, to answer your question specifically, we're really looking at changing ordinance here. It doesn't have anything to do with the individual or the developer, but changing the ordinances so we kind of direct development, regardless of who's doing it, as we move forward. And so it's not a question of making changes for developers, it's making changes for the city as the city grows forward. Now, granted, we have neighborhoods and developers online because we want to make sure what we're doing, what we're interacting with the departments is actually going to work as we move forward, work for everyone involved as we move forward. So we have addressed ADUs, and that is something that we are working on recommendations now.
I agree with what you're saying, but an example of that would be getting rid of the 12-foot driveway, getting rid of the 5-foot sidewalk, getting rid of the third parking spot. Currently, right now, the way things are, you can't get if you don't want a separate meter, you can't have a full kitchen. Those are the types of things that I'm talking about for people that want garage apartments, and all those things have popped up over the last few years, and it got really bad about 3 years ago, and so that's what I'm talking about. Is trying to help out someone get an ADU easier, not to make more units per acre for a developer.
Understood. Mr. Shelton, oh, no, go ahead, Savita. I was going to ask for you.
Thank you. I just want to respond to that question is, yes, our co-chair is correct that it's not about the developers or the property owners, but it is changing the regulations. I do hear your concerns, and what you have brought up, we already discussed with the committee and made recommendations for ADUs. And there are some recommendations related to reduce parking or no parking requirements in situations where the ADU is 1,000 square feet or smaller. So let's, if you can please send me an email to livableplaces@houstontx.gov, and then we can connect, and I'll be able to share a lot of information with you that can help.
All right, thank you so much for your hard work.
Thank you, Mr. Shelton. We appreciate your being with us today. All right, Tamara, who's next?
The next speaker I have is George Frey, Frey.
All right, Mr. Frey, are you there? George Frey.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, yeah, there. Go right ahead, please, sir.
Okay, hi, my name is George Fry. I'm in Super Neighborhood 14, Timber Grove, Lasybrook, Timber Grove. And I just want to thank Savita and Tammy. I think you guys are doing a great job of putting out these pictures, these graphs. I really liked how you guys had that flow chart for the different options. So it was a lot easier to see what was going on, what was being recommended, and focus on what mattered to different areas. For that, I'd like to just repeat what I've said in previous Livable Places public sessions. There's a lot of focus that front loaders are all bad and everything should be shared driveways, but I think there's some good examples of front loaders out there, and where you guys, I think it was a really good idea to encourage the 19-foot general building line to have that dedicated parking spot in the driveway. I think that is what makes front loaders very community friendly. In my area, you can see front loaders right next to shared driveways, and it's actually the front loaders that that are much more social, that people are out and about and more part of the community, versus the shared driveways, shared communities. You really don't get to see people. They don't really interact. So by having a front loader with a sufficient driveway, people get to use their garages for their storage and their entertainment. They get to use their driveway for their parking, and then the sidewalks remain free so that people can walk up and down and really socialize. So I think that's a really, really strong, I'm a really strong advocate for that, and I encourage that going forward. What really surprised me, though, especially with the Vision Zero, is the Vision Zero initiative, is that there was a proposal to provide a variance for the visibility triangle. And I know this is not an engagement, but I think it would be really good to see some data behind that to understand why the visibility triangle shouldn't be respected. I thought that was very important with Vision Zero. And then the last thing I just want to highlight is, it's one thing if we're doing one-off small townhouses here and there or communities, but when you start putting redevelopment side by side, eventually the problems start to develop, where master planning then tends to be, initially it's not an issue, but over time, the more and more the redevelopment occurs, the more the problems appear. And we see that very clearly in my area in Cottage Grove and Shady Acres, where initially it wasn't a big deal, and then all of a sudden it becomes a little bit too late. There's no parking anywhere available. The green space is really limited. We're falling behind on not following the park space plan. So I really think before anything goes forward in terms of encouraging the density and the 0 to 5 foot setback, really understand what the impact is going to be, not on that one little lot, but on the overall picture.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Fry. We appreciate it. All right, Tamara, anyone else?
Yes, the next speaker I have is Tracy Gahn, G-A-H-N.
Hi.
Tracy Gahn?
Yeah, I'm here.
Go right ahead. We can hear you.
Thank you. A couple comments to make sure, and just notes and consideration from a pedestrian perspective, the things that we've come to you guys in planning in the past about any discussion on building in regard to proximity to schools and density and placement, to what George mentioned, reductions in the visibility triangle, perhaps setting a broader, a zone, for example, to give consideration that a certain safety zone, if any of that, Savita, just is in the works. If not, please consider it. And then also, someone mentioned earlier about a nice development on 24th, 25th with fencing and landscaping. One of the things that isn't in the design guide right now is, from a neighborhood deed restriction standpoint, even how far the fence has to be off of the city sidewalk. I think best guess, we've kind of always said a foot, but it's really not laid out with specificity that you can easily find online. And if somebody throws a certain type of landscaping on there and doesn't maintain it, you lose the opportunity to walk on the entire sidewalk. So like I said, if we can give some specificity to some of those street facing or sidewalk facing developments, how far off the sidewalk the fence has to be. And like I said, I see it's out there sometimes, but it's very hard right now from the average homeowner, and then fall out as a pedestrian. And then one more thing on the parking on the both sides of the street, comment to what the gentleman said earlier. Yeah, we don't have signs, or if the signs get removed, people are parking on the sidewalks. So giving consideration, like what we're dealing with on 19th and 20th Street with the bars and on Washington, streets that don't have curbs, helping developers have guidance on what they can build and plan for, or encouraging them to pay for signs for streets that don't have curbs, because otherwise our sidewalks become the parking area on those streets.
Right. Thank you, Tracy. We appreciate that. All right. Tamara, anyone else?
Yes, I have Mike Young, YOUNG signed up next.
Mike Young, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Go right ahead, please.
Okay. I'd just like to offer a little bit of a unique perspective here because I guess my company is one of the larger developers and builders in town, and I check a lot of the boxes of what you're asking for. We develop communities that have front-facing houses that are loaded with off of a shared driveway. The garage is opposite the street. We do courtyards. We're trying to build affordable housing. So I guess I'm listening to all that's being proposed here and kind of filtering it through what we do. And I would say that maybe one concern I have is that there are some unintended consequences to what's being proposed, specifically to larger projects. So as I read this, I think that there's a stipulation that says if it's over 15,000 square feet, that basically front loaders are being eliminated from those size projects. And I would say this, by removing that, that is one of the tools in a developer's toolbox to lay out a site plan to maximize density. And I don't say that like you're loading up on front loaders, but if you can imagine just for a second that a site might only lay out for an odd number of rows of houses. So you have a house on either side of a shared driveway, and then you have room for one more house. If you cannot front load houses, then your density can be greatly affected, and somebody's property value therefore could be drastically impacted by removing that as a tool. Also, I would say that front loaders sometimes are necessary and beneficial in certain instances because they get you out of harm's way with power lines because of the setbacks. So there was a suggestion here that said that if we reduce setbacks, in some situations from 10 to 5 or from 5 to 0, that sounds good on paper, but practically speaking, with all the above ground power that we have here in Houston, you cannot build in that space. And so that presents a challenge. Also, I think that with having some mix of front loaders in these larger communities, there obviously is a demand and there's a higher value placed on those, which means that you can reallocate.
Go ahead.
You can reallocate some of your lot costs to those higher density units, which then creates an opportunity to have more affordable units on the interior of the community with the shared driveway layout. So I would just say there's a few things with that. Also, I don't know if maybe as a possibility that we can initiate maybe a percentage limit, only allow up to a certain percentage of the units to be front loaders. Also, I'm questioning, is this relative to the entire city of Houston area, or is this more of the urban areas? Is this limited to, within 610, or does this go all the way out to, city of Houston proper? Obviously, Chapter 42 taking a number of developments out, to the Beltway. There's just a market there for these types of homes, and in some parts of town, there's not a street parking concept like we're talking about in the more urban areas. So also, just lastly, I would say that one concern that we get as a builder often is that when we try to make those street-facing homes, there's security concerns in certain parts of the city, and you put a wrought iron fence out, or you have people that are parking on the street. They don't want that. They want to be behind the gate. They want to be behind, inside a community, or they want to have their own garage facing the street. They can park a car and be out of harm's way. So just presenting some different thoughts from my vantage point.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Young. We appreciate your coming to the meeting and your comments. Thank you. All right, Tamara, anyone else?
I have one more speaker, Scott Burr, Burrer.
All right, Mr. Burr, are you there? Scott Burr. All right, I'm not seeing him on our attendees list. Mr. Burr, if you're there, you're muted. And I am not seeing Mr. Burr. There you are. Mr. Burr, are you there? You're muted.
Are you there now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, I apologize. I'm not the greatest at working this. Scott Burr, Burrer. I think several of the speakers covered it, so I'll try to be brief. I guess I have 3 questions and comments for the committee. First, I believe I read a note in there that said that you all will allow density up to 35 units per acre, given, looked to me like about 18 different caveats. I'm just curious if anyone's ever done that in the city and if that's even possible. I don't know if it is, but with that, assuming that is possible. Number 2, I've walked many of these the locations you all recommended us to go see, and I would echo, I believe it was George's comment. My observation of the front loaders is that they're not the parking problem. In fact, it seems like it gives more optionality to the homeowners. And when you get on these shared driveway developments, the street parking is worse. So if parking is that big of a deal, I sure would question the decision or the recommendation to totally eliminate front loaders. I'm not sure I'm following the track on that. And then finally, and I think the most important, I think the lady that spoke first hit the nail on the head. What have y'all done to consider affordability? Because the gentleman that spoke before me, the builder, I think makes a great point, and I may be putting words in his mouth, but this is what I heard. If you eliminate options, doesn't that make it harder for the builders to give us affordable housing? And frankly, it seems like there's a lack of it in the city of Houston. So those would be my comments.
All right, Mr. Burr, thank you so very much. We'll definitely take those into consideration. And as the question was, your first question was 35 units. No, that is not being done today. That is looking to be a recommendation to up the number of units per acre so that in fact we can provide a little more affordability. But that's just the short answer to a very long question. So thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it. All right, anyone else? Mara?
I don't have anyone else signed up to speak.
All right then. All right, we're almost out of time. Is there anyone else who is here who is not signed up to speak who would like to address the committee? All right then, hearing none, I show the next item on the agenda is dismissal. At this point, adjourn this meeting. Subida or Tammy, did you have anything else?
No, sir. Thank you so much, and everyone who provided comments and feedback.
All right, the next meeting is June 7th from 3 to 5, our usual time. I hope to, quote, see you all there. Thank you so very much for participating today, all of you, our guests and our subcommittee members. You've done a tremendous job, and I want to thank city planning staff for doing all of this hard work and putting all of your information, your recommendations, your questions to the test, so to speak, and coming up with these recommendations today. So kudos to planning department and everyone else involved. Thank you so very much, Suvita.
Thank you, and we are ready to adjourn.
And with that, I will adjourn this meeting. Thank you so very much, everyone. We'll see you in June. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye.